All right. Welcome back to Access to Anyone. I'm your host, Michael Roderick, and we are here today with Brandon Youst, founder of Urban Farm Academy. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Brandon.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, what I always love to start with is background story. And I'm always really interested in sort of what it is that causes us to go into the fields that we go into and what are those sort of big life changing moments, if you will. So, I'd love to just hear how you got started and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing currently.
Yeah, sure. I could skip a lot of details of my childhood. It was pretty average and vanilla, but I just did what I was told, going to college, did that whole thing. I got into corporate finance, which took me a couple years to really understand that wasn't a place that I wanted to spend another 5 years. So that just kind of figuring out who I was, what I wanted to do with my future, knew it wasn't that. And from then it's just been a journey of self-exploration, figuring out what I like to do, learning along the way. And now I found myself involved in food and agriculture. So when I was sitting at that corporate job, I was like, well, I've already got this degree. I'm not going down this road. I get to start from scratch. I get to completely reinvent my life and start something new. And so I took the time to do it and found podcasts, found books at the same time. And I've been on this self-improvement kick ever since because I had so much student debt, I couldn't fail. If I was going to start something new and start my own business, failing was not an option. And I haven't missed a student debt payment since I left my job. And to me, that feels like success right now.
Yeah, congrats on that, because I know there are a lot of people deferring their student loan payments, stressing about their student loan payments. Right?
Yep.
It's a really intense experience. So talk to us a little bit about when you got started. So you sort of stepped away from this job. I find that we get accustomed to a certain type of lifestyle when we're doing really, really well. So I'm curious, did you have sort of that, I guess you could call it almost like the reverse of growing pains, right? Where it's like you're spending like a boatload of money, or you have a lot of money to spend, and all of a sudden you got to go back to like really tightening your belt and being pretty lean. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess I always had a sense of disconnection with just everything that we do and being in these buildings and being stuck in an office all day. But then, you look across the office and you see the person who's 10 years ahead of you. And you're like, well, I don't want to spend 10 years just to sit over there. And that just felt soul crushing to me. So that plus like the disconnection of the whole office environment, just the corporate culture, working for somebody else. I understand not everyone can be a business owner, doesn't want to be, but for me, that just that sense of freedom. And I didn't really know what that was, but when I started hearing podcasts and they recommend books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it just opened up new worlds for me. Like, and I don't think I can unlearn that either. So now that I know, there's no going back. So it was really just a matter of then, since I had to just recreate everything, what would I actually like doing? And I had all these new frameworks and like confidence to just give it a go. And I had the time because I still had the job. I decided to move with my mom and dad, even though I didn't exactly know what I was going to do, start saving money, and just take my time, figure it out. And then once I was ready, just attack it.
Huh. So where did the idea come from? Because a lot of the time, people sort of step away. They're testing a lot of different ideas. How did you end up sort of getting into this field? Were you always interested in farming? Like, how did this work?
So the Urban Farm Academy teaches a lot of different ways to get involved into food and agriculture. Because when I was sitting at that office environment, that gap from where I was sitting to where I wanted to be just seemed so. There's no template. There's no like yellow brick road to walk down. So figuring that out is what we're relaying through that. But at that moment, it was just, well, what do I want to do with my life? And taking my interests, which I was the guy in the office who would bring in all of my meals for the week. On Monday, I would just have a stack of them there and all different stuff because I enjoy cooking and I really care about my health. And so I always had small gardens and everything. Our office was next to a state park. I'd be there in the morning, I'd go for lunch, and then I'd go after work. And it really just kind of like told me something that, why am I doing this? I'm obviously attracted towards this. So by combining my love for growing things and then cooking things, I also kind of stumbled upon the realization that I can turn a $2 head of lettuce into a $10 salad now. And that poor farmer mentality, or that defeating feeling of, not living a rich lifestyle, or not being wealthy anymore, or not having a good paying job, it evaporated. It completely changed my mindset of what was actually possible. So I just carry this approach forward now by saying, if you're out there and you have a job that you don't like, and you had dreams of having a farm, but you don't want to be the poor farmer, well, I'm an example of saying I chose a few things to grow. I turned them into meals. I deliver it to my customers. It's a very low waste service. And now I just want to teach that business model to people everywhere, like people like in my position who are looking for the path forward. Not that you have to recreate everything I'm doing, but if I can give you a framework to operate within, you can create something that's unique to you.
Yeah. So one of the things I focus on the show a lot is the idea of relationship building. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who they've decided they want to start their own thing. Maybe they've kind of put a stake in the ground, if you will. But they're probably struggling with that initial sort of outreach, that initial sales process. Can you take us back to the very beginning of when you started to actually reach out to your network and to sort of your community, and talk about how did you overcome the challenge of now it's up to you to sell as opposed to just like working in an office, and B, cultivate the kinds of relationships that made this actually last as opposed to just be this one-off thing that you did.
Yeah. Now, look, I recommend people kind of ease into it and sort of do a side hustle while they're doing their job. But just my life situation for me meant that I was moving to a completely different state. Like I was quitting my job and then, going at this thing. So I didn't know anybody down there. I didn't know one person. But it's just getting out there, getting my face out there. I'd built a food truck that I can sell my meals through, and something that catches people attention. So I was at the farmers markets doing events, just doing community outreach that way. And, it's a town of 30,000 people. So you don't get completely lost. If you're out there and you're kind of doing something different, a little crazy, your name's going to get out there that way. So, and just understanding who are the local influencers. Like I joined the Chamber of Commerce because, it's kind of a good old boys club down there. You kind of have to know certain people.
Sure.
So I understood that. And that really took me a long way at the beginning.
Interesting. So where are you now? When you sort of look at from where you kind of started, what does the business look like now? Does it look like what you expected it to look like?
Yeah. Well, my whole goal, I just knew when I was quitting my job, it's like this transitionary period, this feeling, like making that first step, like building that little bit of momentum is probably the most important thing in this process, because that's where everyone gets stuck, because they don't know what that first step to take is. And so for me, I was building this local, business model where we're making meals and we're delivering it once a week. And that was just the local version. But it was a business model that if I knew I can develop, then it can be replicated. It could be replicated everywhere. And I'm not trying to franchise this thing. I'm just saying, here's the framework that I applied to do this. And it can be applied anywhere else. Like I'm in a town of 30,000. It gets better when you're in a more urban environment because you can get even higher prices. There's the community of vegans in my area is very small, but yet we have a pretty successful business in that small area. So, just showing people that they need to see the example, they need to see it done on a local level, but then they need someone to amplify it through a speakerphone to reach everyone nationally. And that's what the Urban Farm Academy is. It's putting courses out there and saying, here's an example of a business owner running this kind of business and killing it in this way. And that's just there for you to help you envision what you're going to do.
So how do you feel people can get over the hump of taking content and actually doing something with it? Because a lot of the education out there, especially if it's online, especially if it's like, here's this course, there's actually a lot of statistics about courses not being completed and people actually not doing the work. So if somebody's out there and they're thinking, wow, this is really great and I would love to get some kind of education on this, but they're saying to themselves, you know what, I may just buy a course or decide to get a course and then not actually do it. What do you say to those people?
Well, hey, not finishing a course is actually okay, because it seems like you figured out you didn't like it. And instead of going $100,000 into debt like I did and spending 5 years in an office figuring out I didn't like it, it took you, an hour, 2 hours? Yeah, you lost some money up front, but you got to move on quickly. And time is what we can't get back. We can get back money, but we can't get back time. So I understand not everyone's going to take the course and follow through and make everything with it. But if they learned more about themselves while taking that course, I think that's okay too.
That's a really interesting take. I think, that there are a lot of people who would sort of look at if they spent money on something and then it didn't work out, they would look at it as a loss. But what you're bringing up is a really important point, which is that even if you do spend money on something and it doesn't work out the way that you want, or you have a bad experience, there's so much you can learn. There's so many things that you can discover and sort of figure out. I know that personally, when I've hosted events and worked on projects before, the ones I learned the most from were the ones where it was just like, fell on my face, right? That you sort of tank. So one of the topics that I love to talk about, specifically with entrepreneurs, that I think is really, really important on the relationship building side, is the topic of saying no. And so how you figure out what you say yes to and what you say no to, and how do you sort of guard your time, right? So that you're not just always sort of hit up. So I'd love to hear, what is your current sort of thought process around that? Obviously, in your capacity, you probably have people who reach out to you. You probably have tons of people who try to sell you things, right? So tell us a little bit about your process for saying no and anything that you would suggest for people who struggle with it.
Yeah. Well, I am absolutely militant about my time and the people I allow in my life. So that's number one. I can't have people who suck up my time. If you saw my day to day, you'd be like, well, all he does is work out and walk around his yard. But I'm thinking, and I'm protecting my mind space, and I'm calling people and talking ideas with people. So that's really the most important thing. Like, another reason why I don't want kids right now is just because I don't want that distraction. I need focus, and for me, I feel like I've done a pretty good job of not putting myself in a position where I can be hijacked. So I like to say, I'm not busy, but I'm too busy for coffee.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, if you got something, like, there's an approach, and this. Like, when we throw out some crazy idea to some influencer, we never hear back. There's a good reason for that, because we didn't put up the work up front, or it just doesn't make sense. And so I think everyone just has to realize, everyone's trying to protect their space and their time, and you've got to do that too. The only way you can get your goals done, if you just got to put blinders on everything else. And so I have my one goal for the day. It's the first thing I do, and then the rest of the day is kind of like free space. There's no pressure for me to do anything, but that's where all my good ideas come from, because I'm just relaxed, but I also have my space protected. And when I lose it, I feel it, and I got to get it back, because it doesn't remain perfect.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point, which is, I think that a lot of the time we lose our time as a result of, we don't want to disappoint other people, right?
Yeah.
Where like somebody reaches out and they want to grab coffee, and we're just like, oh yeah, no, I'd really love to do that. But the fact of the matter is, there's only so many hours in a day. And if you spend all of your time just taking meetings and having conversations with people, in some cases that don't actually go anywhere, you never get a chance to do that personal development work, right? You never get to do the real work on the business.
Yeah. And, I was learning from you the other day about, networking and keeping in touch with people. And I go back and forth on this. Like, I'm not really good at following up with people or keeping in touch, because I also kind of don't want to establish a relationship where, like, you can just call me and just shoot, just talk for a while. Like, what you got?
Yeah.
What you got? Call me. What do you got?
Yeah.
And people know that about me now. So
yeah,
they're usually, not that I'm always business or whatever.
Sure,
I have my friends, but it's just like, hey, when it's during the day, when you call me, like, what you got for me?
Yeah. Well, I think, you are setting boundaries, right? Yep. And that's something that everybody can learn from. And your boundaries are stricter, right, than some others may be, but they're stricter because that's what you are focused on right now, right? So some people, their businesses and sort of the way that they operate, it's mainly focused on, they have to take as many meetings as possible, right? Whereas in your situation, it's more about like growing the business and focusing on the business. So I think, a lesson for those of you who are out there who are thinking about outreach is to ask yourself, like, is this a CEO who it's their job, like it's a big part of their job to have lots of conversations, or is this a CEO who, like, they need to just they're doing the work, and maybe it's better for you to not reach out to that person. Maybe reach out to the COO or somebody else from the company.
I'm the CEO that doesn't need all the updates. Like, and this just because it creeps up on you, these things. And it was like 2-3 days ago, I sent a message to some of my team. I was like, hey, from you, no more than 5 phone calls a day. Like, I appreciate that you want to update me, but I can't. I need my space. And then this other person was like, you got to text me less or make it a complete sentence because I can't take all the dings. I either got to turn my phone off or just like anything like that. These distractions, and people have said it takes 20 minutes to get your focus back. I don't know if it's that long, but the point is well made. You know, you got to protect your time. And so I guess that's why I like living in the middle of nowhere with no kids, and allows me to think of all these things, and then I can go attack it. I know exactly the tunnel I got to take to go take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really great point about context switching, right? Where basically if you're working on one thing and all of a sudden you're working on another thing, your brain is going in a completely different direction. So it's hard to stay in flow if you're doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how you moved from sort of just selling out of a truck, which was probably just you, to actually having a team. Because I think a lot of people struggle with A, when do they hire? B, should they? Like, there's so much that happens just psychologically when people are thinking about having a team. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, you got to know what your end goal is. Like, is this a business I'm going to run by myself and I'm going to be capped at this? Or do I want to build a team and sort of take that ownership role and just allow other people to do what they do best? For me, I have amazing people that work with me, and that's why I don't need 5 phone calls a day, because I trust them so much that they are handling it, and I like that role because I'm trying to. I do start calling myself an entrepreneur, and I wasn't a big fan of that word before, but I really do feel like I'm just trying to solve problems, and I'm putting people in places to help me do that, and all of these plates that I have spinning, they all go up to much bigger and bigger things, but they're all working together and they all need each other. So my role is just to make sure everyone's happy and just kind of keep my finger on the pulse. And that allows me to make sure, that a CEO's job, like you can start as many fires as you can handle. But, if you kind of have everything under control and people understand their boundaries, it's just a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah. In terms of your relationships and relationship building, if you can sort of think back sort of through the business, was there anything that you feel was just like an absolute faceplant where you're just like, wow, I really screwed up with that individual or maybe with that company or with that person, and a lesson that came that came out of it? Because I find that relationship building, some of the best lessons come from those moments where you look back and you say, oh man, I probably should not have done this, or this didn't work out.
Not too much comes to mind, because it's almost like the universe will steer you in the way that, so like when you reach out to somebody, you don't hear back, you move on, out of sight, out of mind, you've already kind of moved on. But yeah, I have been guilty. And when you're in the first year, second year, third year, you're kind of reaching out to people, podcasters, companies that don't kind of take you seriously yet.
Sure.
So, I've sent some of those wackadoo emails, for sure. And I don't know if I'd totally change it, because it allowed me to learn. I had to do that to know better now, or just realize like no one's going to change their business overnight or through one email or anything. Like what I focus on now is enrollment and the things that I want, the larger projects that I'm working on. And you know how this goes. Like you're talking to them, and by the time you actually do make the ask, it's already obvious. Like they're already on board.
Yeah.
So I love doing that now, because my stuff can be crazy sometimes, and it's new. Everything's kind of new and not done. But because I have good people I trust, and we've been going back and forth, and we take our time. It seems to work out better that way. Just it's personal relationships, man. That's all it is.
Yeah. And it is one of those things where we do have to sort of test out. When we're doing outreach, it's not it's even if you're well researched, even if you've spent a lot of time, like you're still going to have some instances where it's just not elegant, right? Where it just like you just don't do it the way that you would like, and it doesn't get you the result that you want, and you learn from that, right?
And patience is key, because like I'm at the point in my business where like I'm starting to like go for some bigger plays.
Sure.
And no, I need a personal connection there. I need to develop this first. I won't even ask for that kind of meeting without like some sort of introduction or like easy way to make that happen, because sometimes you only get one chance with these things.
Sure.
You know, especially if they don't know you, and you can turn people off real quick. So just being more mindful of like putting yourself in their shoes. And also like, cause I get the wackadoo emails now,
Sure.
but I've also sent them. So I know both sides of it. And so how do you not, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad as one of the sort of prominent books for you. Were there any other books that really just kind of, especially when you were starting, really just kind of like cracked your world open?
Yes.
And sort of pushed you?
I got to say the 4-Hour Work Week, it's kind of cliche to even talk about that one, but it presents a framework and gives you permission to try things. Like you open the door, but you can close it right away.
Yeah.
And you can move on. And it was about like, that bootstrapping mindset, being, I'd use the word pivot a lot, because knowing that you're going to pivot and being ready for it and open to it allows you to just read things a lot quicker. So that gave me permission to think in a way I'd never thought before. Cause like, here's a guy who decided to do something. He did it. What's stopping me?
Yeah.
And because I already decided I was recreating my life, like it was the whole new rules could apply. And you have to take that into consideration now, because you can't unlearn things sometimes either, which is good and bad, because it deepens the pit in your stomach when you're sitting in that chair at that office still. But at the same time, like the universe is giving you an opportunity for growth, and you've got to be willing to take it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that book, because the personal development world is probably one of the only places where the book feels like the person's talking directly to you.
Yeah.
Right? Like we can read business books, and we can read, any number of other texts that sort of give us a breakdown of things, but it's only those personal development books where it's like you feel like you're sitting down with the person.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember reading 4-Hour Work Week, and it felt like, Tim Ferriss was telling me, test this thing out, try this thing out. Like it felt very direct, which I think is just something that you don't see very often.
Yeah.
And I can totally see where that would start to sort of create those shifts. Now, you're reading all these books, right? Problem that a lot of people have is they read all these books and they spend all their time just sort of educating themselves and reading and never actually implementing. So what's your thought process in terms of implementation?
There's a time to put down the book and go do it. I mean, that's simple. And I know when I'm doing that. You got to know when you're procrastinating just reading, but you know when it's time to do it. Now, in my position, I'm mostly like waiting on other things to develop. So I get real frustrated. Like, let's make it happen. But like the timing's not right. So you just have to like wait for things to kind of like happen in the way that they should.
Yeah.
So those are the times to read. And I'm kind of like preparing myself for the next like PR. I'll read a book on PR and like kind of like get myself ready. But now that we've launched the Urban Farm Academy, it's like, no, I took my notes. I wrote down everything I need to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go start reading some other book. It's like, let's handle this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point. And if you're out there and you're listening, this is something you want to think about, because a lot of people make this mistake. In personal development, you could find like hundreds of books, and you could read about a lot of different topics, and it will be candy for your brain. You'll be jumping back and forth and all these different types of things. But if you just spend all your time reading about all these different types of things and you never implement anything, you'll just still be in the same place that you are. So it's really important to sit down and say, okay, what is this next thing that I'm working on, right, and which books are going to fit and help me solve those problems, fix those issues. And then once I've done that, once I've got a better sense of it and I'm executing and finding out, then whatever comes next, say, okay, what are the books that I need? What are the books that I need now?
Yeah, they call that just-in-time learning. Like, don't just pick a book just to pick a book. Pick a book that you need right now.
Yeah.
But except at the beginning. At the beginning, you read those fundamental books like 4-Hour Work Week and Rich Dad Poor Dad, because they're opening your mind up to something completely different. And then you start going down the rabbit hole of all these things.
Yeah. Speaking of rabbit holes, how does social media kind of affect your life, especially as somebody who is really thoughtful about sort of keeping their own time? There are a lot of people who end up sort of stuck on there, right? And sort of trapped in that world, and they're always back and forth. So how do you handle it? How do you think about it?
Well, I think as business owners, we all wish we could avoid Facebook. It's like Instagram's a fun place to play. People are pretty positive. It's pictures, all that. And Facebook's not the worst. But there's a lot of communities there, like Facebook groups. And, because I'm out in the woods and I'm by myself, like I do use the internet to connect with people. So, just like anything else, we look at it a little bit too much and all that. But I don't hold back from banning people. It's like, no, this is my page. This is my world. You're not going to come in and poop on it,
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you're not adding to what we're trying to do,
Sure.
it's like, so I don't know. And just having perspective on what it is and what it's for. I don't need it. It's, just don't let it consume you, or that whole game.
Yeah.
Just do you. Like I felt like I've been pretty authentic to what I want to see. Like I feel proud of the things I've done. And I just hope that if I can improve my skills in communicating all that, it'll resonate.
Yeah. So how much does activism come into the work that you do? These days it's become a very big thing to be like, I'm not going to use plastic. I'm not going to use this. There's a lot, there's a much larger push, I would say, in the past couple of years, really. Yeah. So how much does that tie to the business model that you have and the work that you guys are doing?
Well, in farming and agriculture, idealism is a problem. And I don't even use the word activism probably as much as I could because people don't want to be told what to do. You're not going to stand on a soapbox. I'm not going to shame you into using glass, or something like that. People are going to do what they do. You have to give them a good reason to change. Like I forget to take my reusable tote into the grocery store sometime. Me, as someone who runs like a zero waste business, I forget, right?
Yeah.
But if you started charging me 50 cents every time I'm in there for a bag, I'm going to change my behavior. So we have to reframe, we need to recalibrate our behaviors. And the way you do that is a recycling program. It takes 10, 15 years for people to actually get used to doing it.
Yeah, right.
And because we're so ingrained with our habits, but yet we're so lost. We're shipping beer across oceans. Like my favorite beer is Heineken. It makes no sense. Why are we doing that? There's local breweries everywhere now.
Yeah.
And so let's apply that framework to all of these things that we eat and consume. We can do it locally, but we're not doing it on a soapbox, and that's why. I say to farmers, get a commercial kitchen. Take what you're growing and turn it into something that people actually want, because people are not shopping for ingredients. They're looking for food. So, we make pesto, kombucha, pizza, ramen, tacos. That's what the masses want. So we could either be idealistic and do all these things. We're still going to reach that 2% of the market that comes to the farmer's market and loves our stuff, but we're not going to actually make a difference. Yeah. The only way we're going to make a difference is by understanding that convenience is number one. That's why Walmart won. And that's okay, because we've exposed ourselves. We're all exposed. That's why there's always Walmarts. We all go there. We all shop there. That's what people want, because convenience leads. So we just, again, as farmers, have to recalibrate our own thinking and the way we approach the market. So all that idealism, activism, I just don't use those terms, because just like any other business, we have to meet people where they want to be met with the products that they want.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point. I think that there's a lot of stuff out there where you feel like you're being pushed towards doing something, or you're shamed. And what we've learned just from a consumer standpoint is that when you feel shamed, you may do it once, you may be kind of pushed in a particular direction, but you're probably not going to stay with it. Right.
Yeah, you feel a little resentment. And this is the whole climate change thing is a good example where it's become so polarized, because there's people talking down to each other, and I'd rather enroll you than tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the enrollment piece is a really important one. So I imagine we're probably going to be getting close to our time pretty soon, but and I have a question I ask every single guest. But before we get into that, if people are listening and they're really interested in what you have to offer and what you're putting out there, where should they go? What should they sort of pay attention to?
Sure. You can go to urbanfarmacademy.com. We just launched in the last few weeks. My course particularly is called Farm Fusion, but we have a variety of courses there. If you don't like what you're doing, if you're in a career that you don't like, or you're in school, you're trying to figure things out, and you've always thought about getting involved in food and agriculture, we want to help you with that gap, and we want to help you figure out what makes you unique and what product you can create that you're going to enjoy doing that the market will also want.
Awesome. So the question that we ask every single guest is, if you could have access to anyone, you got a chance to sit down with anyone that you like,
Yeah.
they have to be living, who would that one person be?
This kind of sounds cliche again, but it's like I can't think of any other one but Joe Rogan had such an impact on my life because when you sit down with someone for 3 hours, and that's an expert at the top of that field for 3 hours, you get to know about that person and you get to learn a lot more about what they have to offer. And he's facilitated those conversations. So my goal, one of my goals as entrepreneurs, if I can sit next to him on his podcast, I did something right. But there's also a lot of people like I'm his demographic. I mean, he's got a wide demographic.
Sure,
it's probably
sure.
the widest ever, but there's a lot of people out there. Like the cannabis industry is a good example of all these kids are going out there starting businesses. They finally found something that they can that makes them passionate, and they're doing it, right? It might be weed, okay, but they found a reason to get off the couch and go do something. And there's a lot of people that listen to his podcast that he's inspiring, and they want to do something, but they just don't know what. And what the Urban Farm Academy does is just provides, here's how we're doing it, and here's new frameworks to apply. And it's a good thing. It rebuilds our food system. It can be profitable for you, all of these things. So I would just love the exposure of reaching that audience, because that was me.
So if you did get a chance to actually sit down with him, what would be the number one question you'd ask?
What would I ask Joe? I wouldn't really ask him anything. I love how he just, you just talk back and forth and everything comes up and you get to speak of why these things matter, why recalibrations are needed. Just put that thought into someone's head. Like next time you order a Heineken, no, go for the local beer. Like it's small decisions like that. If we can make these micro changes, maybe that builds a little momentum.
Yeah.
Or like the business model where we grow it, we cook it, we deliver it. Like we own the supply chain.
Yeah.
So to get that little thought, to know that that's possible in other people's heads, like that's our goal. So if I can change a few people's thinking, like that's great. And, Joe's got the biggest audience, so I just went for the biggest one,
There you go. That's awesome. I love it. So, folks, if you are out there and you and Joe Rogan are hanging out, Brendan would love to talk to you. He'd just hit us up. Just let us know. We can maybe try to make something happen. That'd be pretty cool, right?
Sweet. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was really, really fascinating. I think that a lot of people are starting to think about this idea of their food and this concept of farming. And I think that now there's a lot of new things to think about and focus on. So again, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we will see you all next week on Access to Anyone. Talk to you next time.